The alarm bells rang through the metal halls of the Starship Harmony, Edge making everyone stop what they were doing and look around with worried faces. Captain Jin Woo was sitting in his small room drinking coffee when the red lights on his wall, the coffee cup shook in his hands as he read the emergency message that appeared on his data screen. Something. Start a war. Jin Woo put down his coffee and read the message again, hoping he had misunderstood, but the words were clear. Ambassador Veltar from the Valkyrian Empire had brought his pet with him to the peace talks, and the creature had escaped from its cage during the night. The security teams had found it hiding in the air vents above the main conference room, where the most important leaders in the galaxy was a shadow maw from the jungle world of Velcro's prime. These creatures were as tall as two grown men standing on top of each. With soft butter, their eyes glowed gold like small suns, and when they roared, the sound could break glass. Most people in the galaxy were afraid of shadow maws, and for good reason. Where even the trees had teeth, the Valkyrians were the only ones brave enough or crazy enough to keep them as pets. But even they had trouble controlling these beasts. Jin Woo stood up and walked to his small window that looked out into space, where millions of stars twinkled like tiny diamonds. He had grown up on a farm colony called New Seoul, where his family raised animals from Earth and from other worlds too. Shadow Maw was different from any farm animal he had ever seen. His communication device buzzed, and the face of Commander Hai-Jin appeared on the screen. "We have a big problem," she said, without saying hello first. "The Valkyrian ambassador is very angry about his pet, and he says if anything happens to it, he will cancel all the peace talks." Jin Woo felt his stomach drop like he was falling. The peace talks had been planned for 2 years, and they were supposed to end the border wars that had been going on for decades. If the talks failed, thousands of people would die in more fighting. "What do you need me to do, Commander?" he asked, even though he was afraid of the answer. "The ambassador wants a human to take care of his pet while he attends the meetings." Hai-Jin said, "We told him we could assign any of our security officers, but he specifically asked for someone with animal experience," he says. "He has heard stories about humans and their way with creatures." Jin Woo looked back out at the stars and remembered his childhood. Ones that looked scary on the outside. She used to say that the meanest bull could become gentle if you showed it kindness instead of fear. But this was not a bull. This was a creature that had killed 3 professional handlers on its home world. According to the reports Jin Woo had read, the Valkyrians trained their shadow maws using pain and fear to make them obey. For ceremonies, the creature is only 2 years old, Hai-Jin continued, which makes it like a teenager in human years, but it is already 8 feet tall and weighs as much as a small vehicle. The ambassador says it has been acting strange since they arrived on the station, more aggressive than usual, and it will not eat the food they brought. Jin Woo closed his eyes and tried to imagine what it would be like to be a young creature taken from its jungle home and forced to live in a metal cage. He thought about how scared and angry he would feel if someone bigger than him kept him locked up and hurt him when he did not obey. "How long would I need to watch it?" he asked. 3 days, Hai-Jin replied. "Just until the peace talks are finished. The ambassador will be in meetings from morning until night, so the creature will need someone to feed it and make sure it stays calm." Jin Woo walked over to his desk, where he kept a picture of his family back on New Seoul Colony. His grandmother was in the center of the photo, smiling and holding a baby alien creature that looked like a cross between a cat and a lizard. She had rescued it after its mother was killed by wild predators and raised it like it was her own grandchild. His grandmother had died 5 years ago, but Jin Woo could still hear her voice telling him that all creatures, great and small, deserved love and respect. Said, looking back at the screen, "I will do Itar." "You sure?" Hai-Jin asked. "This is not like the farm animals you grew up with. This creature could kill you without even trying." "Understand the risks," Jin Woo replied, "but if the peace talks fail, many more people will die." "I have to try." Hai-Jin nodded slowly. "The creature is being held in Cargo Bay 7 on Deck 12. Personal attention, not just someone watching from outside." Jin Woo felt his heart beating faster as he thought about going into a small room with a creature that could tear him apart with its bare claws. But he also thought about all the soldiers who would have to fight in more wars if these peace talks failed. "When do I start?" he asked. "Right now," Hai-Jin said. "The ambassador is waiting to meet you before he goes to his first meeting." Jin Woo gathered his things and headed for the door. As he walked through the corridors of the ship toward the cargo bay, he passed other crew members who looked at him with worry and respect. They all knew what he was about to do, and they all thought he was either very brave or very stupid. maybe both, Jin Woo thought to himself as he stepped into the elevator that would take him down to meet the most dangerous creature he had ever seen. The elevator doors closed, and Jin Woo took a deep breath. He thought about his grandmother and all the animals she had helped over the years. He thought about the peace talks and all the lives that depended on them working out most. Of all, he thought about a young, scared creature locked in a metal cage far from home, waiting for someone to either hurt it or help it. The elevator stopped, and the doors opened. Jin Woo stepped out into the cargo bay, where his life was about to change forever. The cargo bay was darker than Jin Woo had expected, with only a few emergency lights casting long shadows across the metal floor. He could hear something moving inside the containment unit. Before he could see it, a low, rumbling sound, like distant thunder mixed with the scraping of claws against metal walls. Dear So Young was waiting for him near the observation window, holding a tablet computer filled with warning messages and emergency procedures. She was the ship's animal doctor, and her face was pale with worry as she watched the creature inside the cage. Its name is Krath, she said in a quiet voice, like she was afraid the creature might hear her. The ambassador brought files about it, but most of the information is about how many handlers it has injured. The Valkyrians believe in showing these creatures who is the boss through fear and pain. Jin Woo moved closer to the observation window and saw the shadow maw for the first time. Krath was even bigger than he had imagined, with black scales that seemed to absorb the light around them, making him look like a living shadow. His golden eyes glowed in the darkness and moved constantly, as if he was looking for enemies that might attack from any direction. The creature was pacing back and forth in the small space, hitting the walls with his tail and breathing in short, quick bursts. Jin Woo had seen this kind of behavior before, in farm animals that had been hurt or scared for too long. It was not anger he was seeing, it was pure terror. Has anyone tried just talking to it? Jin Woo asked, as he studied the way Krath moved around the cage. Dr. So Young looked at him like he had suggested jumping off the ship without a spacesuit. It is a shadow maw, Jin Woo, not a pet dog. They are considered barely smart enough to understand basic commands. Most experts think they are just dangerous animals with no real thoughts or feelings. But Jin Woo was already walking toward the door controls. He had spent years learning to read animal body language, and everything about Krath told him this was not a mindless killer. This was a frightened young creature who had been hurt too many times and did not trust anyone. Wait, So Young called out as Jin Woo put his hand on the door controls. If you go in there, it could kill you in seconds. These creatures have reflexes faster than any human and claws that can cut through steel. Jin Woo stopped, but did not move his hand away from the controls. Look at how he is moving, he said, pointing. Through the window, Krath had stopped pacing and was now pressed against the far wall with his eyes fixed on the door. His whole body was tense, like he was getting ready to fight for his life. That is not the posture of a predator getting ready to attack, Jin Woo continued. That is the posture of prey getting ready to defend itself. He is more afraid of us than we are of him. Despite Dr. So Young's protests, Jin Woo pressed the button, and the heavy door slid open with a loud hiss. The sound made Krath jump and rise up to his full 8-foot height. His claws extended with a metallic sound that made Jin Woo's teeth hurt, and a low growl filled the small room. Easy, big guy, Jin Woo said in the same quiet voice he had used with scared animals. Back on the farm, I know you are frightened. I know people have hurt you before, but I am not here to hurt you. Krath tilted his massive head to one side as if he was trying to understand the gentle tone in Jin Woo's voice. No one had ever spoken to him like this before. On his homeworld, the handlers shouted orders and used electric prods to make him obey. Here was a small creature making soft sounds that did not seem threatening. Woo did something that would have horrified any Valkyrie. He slowly sat down on the floor, making himself smaller and less scary. This was what his grandmother had taught him to do with frightened animals. Make yourself non-threatening and let them come to you when they are ready. My name is Jin Woo, he said quietly, as he settled into a comfortable position. I grew up on a farm where we took care of all kinds of animals. Some of them were big and strong like you. Some of them had been hurt by bad people before they came to us. Watched every movement with his glowing golden eyes, but the aggressive posture was starting to fade. His claws retracted slightly, and his breathing became more regular. The growling stopped and was replaced by a curious silence. I had a grandmother who taught me that every living creature just wants to feel safe. Jinwoo continued as he slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out a protein bar from his lunch. She used to say that the meanest animals were just the most scared ones, and if you showed them kindness instead of fear, they would surprise you. Jinwoo unwrapped the protein bar and broke off a small piece. He held it out toward Krath, but did not try to get closer. Instead, he placed it on the floor between them and then moved his hand back to show he was not trying to trick the creature. "This is for you if you want it," he said, no strings attached. "No punishment if you do not take it, just a gift from one friend." To Another, Krath stared at the piece of food for a long time. His nose twitched as he smelled it, and Jinwoo could see him trying to decide if this was some kind of trap. On his homeworld, food always came with conditions: obey or starve, fight or go hungry. Here was food offered freely, with no demands attached to so. Young watched from the observation window with her mouth open in shock. The biometric readings on her tablet showed that Krath's heart rate was slowing down and his stress hormones were dropping. This was not supposed to be possible with a Shadow Moyu. "No," Jinwoo said as he settled back against the wall. "I bet you miss your home. I bet you miss the jungle and the trees and being able to run free. I am sorry that people took you away from all that." Something changed in Krath's golden eyes. The wariness was still there, but underneath it, Jinwoo could see something else: pain and loneliness and a desperate need for someone to understand what he was going through. Jinwoo began to tell stories about his childhood on New Soul Colony, about the animals his family had rescued and cared for. He talked about a bull that had been beaten by its previous owners, and how long it took before the animal trusted humans again. He described the baby creatures his grandmother had bottle-fed when their mothers could not care for them. As he talked, Jinwoo noticed that Krath was moving closer. The Shadow Maw did not approach directly, but instead moved in a slow spiral, getting a little bit nearer with each circle. Eventually, Krath was close enough to reach out and touch the protein bar with one cloth. Creature sniffed the food carefully, then picked it up and ate it in one quick bite. It was the first time he had eaten anything since arriving on the station. Jinwoo smiled and broke off another piece of the protein bar. "Good boy," he said softly. "See, I told you, I was not here to hurt you for the first time since being captured." Krath felt something he had almost forgotten: the feeling of being safe. The small human creature was not shouting or threatening him. Instead, it was offering food and making gentle sounds that reminded him somehow of his mother calling to him in the jungle when he was very small. So young was frantically taking notes as she watched the impossible scene unfold. In less than an hour, Jinwoo had accomplished what professional handlers had failed to do. In 2 years, he had made a Shadow Maw feel calm and secure. The day went on. Krath moved even closer until he was sitting just a few feet away from Jinwoo. The human continued to talk and share his food, and slowly the terrified creature began to remember what it felt like to trust someone. When Jinwoo finally stood up to leave for the night, Krath made a soft sound that was not quite a growl and not quite a purr. It was the sound of someone who did not want to be alone. "Agani will be back tomorrow morning," Jinwoo promised as he moved toward the door. "I will bring breakfast and we can talk some more." As the door closed behind him, Jinwoo could hear Krath moving around the cage, but this time the sounds were different. Instead of the frantic pacing of a trapped animal, it was the quiet movement of someone settling down to rest. So Young shook her head in amazement as she looked at her readings. "Woo," she said, "what you just did should not be possible, according to everything we know about Shadow Maws." Woo smiled as he headed back to his quarters. "Maybe we do not know as much about them as we think we do." The next morning, Jinwoo arrived at Cargo Bay 7 with a bag full of different foods and a hopeful heart. But when the door to the containment unit opened, Jinwoo got his answer. Krath was waiting by the door. The massive Shadow Maw had positioned himself near the entrance, and when he saw Jinwoo, his golden eyes seemed to light up with something that looked very much like happiness. His tail, which had been lashing nervously the day before, now swayed back and forth in a rhythm that reminded Jinwoo of a dog greeting its favorite person. "Good morning, Krath," Jinwoo said as he stepped into the cage. "I brought breakfast, and I thought maybe we could try some new things." Today Krath made a sound that Jinwoo had never heard from a Shadow Maw before. It was soft and musical, almost like a bird singing, but deeper and richer. The creature approached without any of the caution from yesterday and gently bumped his massive head against Jinwoo's shoulder. So Young was already at her observation post, watching with amazement as she recorded everything on her tablet. The readings she was seeing defied everything the scientific community believed about shadow maw behavior. Krath's stress levels were lower than most domestic animals, and his brain of food. To see what Krath might prefer, he offered pieces of synthesized meat, chunks of alien fruit, and even some of the dried fish snacks that were popular among the human crew. Krath sniffed each option carefully before making his choices, and Jin-Woo was surprised to discover that the fearsome predator seemed to enjoy the sweet alien fruits most of all. Claws which could slice through metal were so careful around Jin-Woo's fingers that the human barely felt their touches. They shared breakfast. Jin-Woo began to experiment with simple commands. "Sit," he said while making a downward gesture with his hand. Krath tilted his head and after a moment lowered his massive body into a sitting position. Boy, Krath, very good. The shadow maw seemed to understand that he had done something right, and his golden eyes sparkled with pride. No one had ever praised him before. This positive reinforcement was completely new to him, and he found himself eager to please this kind human. Over the next few hours, Jin-Woo taught Krath several basic commands. Stay meant to remain in one place. Come meant to approach. Easy meant to calm down when he got excited. Each time Krath followed a command correctly, Jin-Woo would offer praise and a small treat, and each time the bond between them grew stronger. But the real breakthrough came when Jin-Woo decided to try something that Dr. So-young thought was completely crazy and going to try to pet him. Jin-Woo announced as he slowly extended his hand toward Krath's head. That is suicide. So-young called through the communication system. Shadow maws do not allow physical contact even from their Valkyrian handlers. But Jin-Woo had noticed something. In Krath's body language, the creature had been moving closer throughout the morning, and several times Jin-Woo had caught him sniffing his hair or clothes contact but was afraid to initiate it. Jin-Woo moved his hand very slowly, giving Krath plenty of time to pull away if he wanted to. Then something amazing happened. Krath began to purr. The sound was deep and rumbling like a massive engine running smoothly. It vibrated through his entire body, and Jin-Woo could feel it in his chest as the creature leaned into the gentle touch. No human had ever heard a shadow maw purr, because no human had ever made one feel safe enough to express contentment. The crew was gathered outside listening to the impossible sound of a happy shadow maw engineer. Seen anything like this? Shadow maws do not purr, they do not show affection, they certainly do not play. But Krath was definitely playing. Jin-Woo had found a piece of spare rope in the cargo bay, and when he offered one end to Krath, the shadow maw had immediately understood the game. They played a gentle version of tug-of-war, with Krath being very careful not to use his full strength. Even when he got excited, he remembered Jin-Woo's command of easy and would immediately reduce his pull on the rope. The crew members watching were amazed to see the deadly predator acting like an oversized puppy. He would bring Jin-Woo interesting objects he found around the cage, small pieces of metal or colorful bits of plastic, as if offering gifts to his new friend. When Jin-Woo would examine each gift carefully and thank Krath for bringing it, the shadow maw would practically glow with pride. Perhaps the most touching moment came when Jin-Woo sat down to rest and Krath carefully positioned himself nearby. The massive creature was clearly tired from all the playing and learning, but instead of retreating to a corner like he had been trained to do, he lay down. His scaled hide. Jin-Woo reached out and began to scratch gently behind Krath's horned head, and the purring sound grew even louder. The shadow maw closed his golden eyes, and for the first time since being taken from his jungle home, he felt completely safe and content. You know what, Krath? Jin-Woo said softly as he continued the gentle scratching. You just needed someone to see past all those scary scales and claws to the good heart underneath. So-young was frantically documenting everything she observed, knowing that the scientific community would probably not believe her reports without video evidence. The transformation she was witnessing went against decades of research about shadow maw behavior. And Psychology Commander Hai-Jin arrived in the afternoon to check on their progress and found Jin-Woo teaching Krath to shake hands. The sight of the enormous predator carefully extending one clawed hand to gently touch Jin-Woo's palm was something she would remember for the rest of her life. How is this possible? She asked Dr. So-young. Quietly, the reports from Velcro's Prime say, these creatures are barely controllable, even with electric shock collars and punishment cages. I think we have been approaching them all wrong. So-young replied, look at the data. The stress hormones, fear responses, aggressive behaviors, all of that was learned. The Valkyrians created those problems through their training methods. Jin Woo is showing us what these creatures are really like when they feel safe and loved as. The second day came to an end. Jin Woo prepared to leave for the night and made soft whimpering sounds that clearly meant he did not want to be alone. "We'll be back tomorrow morning," Jin Woo promised as he gently patted Krath's head. "I will bring more fruit and we can play some more games." Krath seemed to understand and reluctantly moved back to allow Jin Woo to leave, but as the door closed, the creature settled down right next to it, clearly planning to wait there until his human friend returned. Walking back to his quarters, Jin Woo felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the ship's heating system. He had always known that animals were capable of love and loyalty. Woo would have to figure out how to explain what had happened. But tonight, he just wanted to remember the feeling of earning the trust of a creature that had every reason to hate and fear all. Picture of his grandmother and smiled. She would have loved Krath, he thought. Came from the most unexpected places. On the third morning, something extraordinary happened before Jin Woo even reached the cargo bay. The security guards on duty reported that Krath had been making unusual sounds all night, not the aggressive roars they expected from a shadow mob, but soft calling sounds like he was trying to communicate with someone who was not there. When Jin Woo arrived at the containment unit, he found Krath pressed against the door, waiting for him. The moment the door opened, the massive creature bounded forward with such enthusiasm that he nearly knocked Jin Woo off his feet. The shadow maw was making that musical trilling sound again, but louder and more excited than before. "Whoa!" Their buddy Jin Woo laughed as he steadied himself against Krath's powerful shoulder. "I missed you too, but let's not knock me down before breakfast." Krath seemed to understand that he had been too enthusiastic and immediately became more gentle. But he stayed close to Jin Woo, following him around the small space like an enormous shadow. Every few steps, he would bump his head against Jin Woo's arm or shoulder, as if he needed constant reassurance that his human friend was really their door. So Young arrived early that morning, carrying even more monitoring equipment than usual. The readings she had been getting were so unusual that she wanted to document everything in detail for the scientific community. When she saw how Krath was behaving, her eyes grew wide. "Commander?" "Hi, Jin, this is Dr. So Young," she said into her communication device. "You need to see what is happening down here, the neurological patterns I am reading from the shadow maw are unlike anything in the literature." "What kind of patterns?" The commander's voice crackled back through the speaker, imprinting behavior. So Young replied as she watched Krath carefully position himself between Jin Woo and the door. "The same kind of bonding we see in young animals who have identified a parental figure. The creature thinks Jin Woo is his father." The implications of this discovery hit everyone at the same time. Through the observation window, they could see that Krath had indeed taken on a protective role. He watched the door constantly, as if guarding Jin Woo from potential threats. When Jin Woo moved, Krath moved with him. When Jin Woo sat down, Krath settled beside him, often resting his great horned head on the human's shoulder. This should not be possible. "Commander Hai Jin," said as she arrived to see the situation for herself. Shadow maws are supposed to be solitary creatures. They do not form pack bonds, let alone cross-species attachments, but the evidence was right in front of them. Krath had begun bringing Jin Woo gifts throughout the morning, small, shiny objects he had collected from around the cage, interesting shaped pieces of metal, colorful scraps of fabric, anything he thought might please his human parent. When Jin Woo would examine each gift carefully and thank him, Krath would practically vibrate with happiness. The most touching behavior was how Krath shared his food. Jin Woo had brought the usual selection of fruits and meat, but instead of eating everything himself, Krath would carefully select the best pieces and offer them to Jin Woo first. The gesture was so clearly parental that several crew members watching through the windows had to wipe tears from their eyes. "Jin Woo, you need to understand what you have accomplished here," Dr. So Young said as she watched Krath gently grooming Jin Woo's hair with his massive claws. "You have taken a creature that was traumatized and violent and given it something it has never had before. Unconditional love and acceptance." Jin Woo scratched behind Krath's ears and smiled as the shadow maw melted into the touch like a giant scaly cat. He just needed someone to see past the scary exterior to the frightened child underneath. All creatures want to feel loved and protected, even the ones that look like monsters. But their peaceful morning was interrupted when Jin Woo tried To leave for his lunch break, the moment he stood up and moved toward the door, Krath became severely distressed. The Shadow Maw began pacing frantically and making loud calling sounds that echoed through the cargo bay. He positioned himself in front of the door and refused to let Jinwoo pass it. "Okay, Krath," Jinwoo said gently. "I am just going to get some food. I will be back in 1 hour." But Krath did not understand time measurements. All he knew was that his adopted parent was trying to leave, and every instinct told him to prevent that from happening. The calling sounds became more desperate, and he began to show signs of panic that worried Dr. So Young's heart rate is spiking, she reported. "The stress hormones are climbing rapidly, Jin. Who? I do not think you should leave him alone right now." So Jinwoo made a decision that surprised everyone. He called the kitchen and asked them to deliver his lunch to the cargo bay instead. When the food arrived and Jinwoo settled down to eat, with Krath beside him, the Shadow Maw immediately calmed down and returned to his content purring. "You were afraid I was not coming back, were you not?" Jinwoo said as he shared some of his sandwich with his enormous companion. "I understand that feeling. When I was little and my parents went away on trips, I used to worry they might not return." Krath seemed to understand the gentle tone and snuggled closer to Jinwoo. The warmth and smell of his human parent was comforting, and the steady sound of Jinwoo's voice made him feel safe in a way he had never experienced before. Dr. So Young was documenting behavior patterns that defied everything science thought it knew about Shadow Maws. The creature was displaying complex emotions, problem-solving skills, and social intelligence that suggested true sentience, not the simple predatory instincts that researchers had assumed. When Jinwoo finally did have to leave that evening for sleep, Krath went through the same distress cycle. The Shadow Maw clearly did not understand why his parent had to go away, and the separation anxiety was heartbreaking to witness. "I promise. I will be here first thing in the morning," Jinwoo said as he gently stroked Krath's head. "You are safe here, and I will never abandon." Yalkrith seemed to calm slightly at the reassuring words, but as the door closed, he immediately moved to lie down right next to it, clearly planning to wait there until Jinwoo returned. The security cameras showed him staying in that position all night, occasionally making soft calling sounds as if hoping his human parent might hear and come backward. Of the remarkable bond between Jinwoo and Krath had begun to spread throughout the ship. Crew members would find excuses to walk past the cargo bay, hoping to catch a glimpse of the impossible friendship many of them had grown up hearing stories about. Shadow Maws as mindless killing machines, but seeing Krath play and purr and show affection was changing their understanding of what these creatures really were. Chief Engineer Dong-hyun summed up what everyone was thinking when he said, "I have worked on ships that carried Shadow Maws before, and I have never seen one that was not either sedated or locked in a punishment cage. This creature, with Jinwoo, is like a completely different species." Dr. So Young spent that evening writing her preliminary report, knowing that the xenobiology community would probably demand extensive proof before accepting her findings. The transformation of Krath challenged fundamental assumptions about Shadow Maw intelligence and emotional capacity. But perhaps the most significant change was in Jinwoo himself. Taking care of Krath had awakened something deep in his heart, the protective instincts and nurturing behavior that humans were famous for throughout the galaxy. When he looked at the massive predator, he did not see a dangerous beast. He saw a child who needed love and guidance. That night, as Jinwoo lay in his bunk, he found himself worried about Krath alone in the cargo bay. He wondered if the Shadow Maw was comfortable, if he was lonely, if he understood that Jinwoo would return in the morning. These were the thoughts of a parent concerned about their child, and Jinwoo realized that the bond Dr. So Young had detected was not one-sided. Somewhere over the past 3 days, he had begun to think of Krath as family. The next morning would bring the return of Ambassador Veltar and the challenge of explaining what had happened. But tonight, Jinwoo just held on to the memory of Krath's contented purring and the trust in those golden is tomorrow. Everything would change, but the bond they had formed would last forever. The morning of the 4th day brought tension that filled the air like electricity before a storm. Ambassador Veltar was returning from his peace negotiations, and everyone on the ship knew that explaining what had happened with Krath would not be easy. The Velcarian noble was known for his temper and his strict beliefs about how Shadow Maws should be treated. Jinwoo was coming, but when he entered the containment unit, he found that Krath was already awake and agitated. The Shadow Maw seemed to sense that something was different, and his usual happy greeting was replaced by nervous pacing. "Okay, boy," Jinwoo said softly as he approached his massive friend. "I know you can feel that something is wrong, but I will not let anyone hurt." Yelkreth moved close to Jinwoo and made soft, whimpering sounds that clearly indicated distress. The bond between them had grown so strong that the Shadowmaw could pick up on Jinwoo's emotional state, and the human was definitely anxious about the coming meeting. It was about to happen. The scientific evidence they had gathered over the past 3 days was extensive, but they all knew that Ambassador Veltar was not a creature who cared much for human research. The sound of approaching footsteps in the corridor outside made Krath freeze completely, his golden eyes fixed on the door, and a low growl began to rumble in his chest. Jinwoo had never heard him make that particular sound before, and when he looked at the Shadowmaw's body language, he realized what was happening. "You remember him, do you not?" Jinwoo said quietly as he placed a comforting hand on Krath's shoulder. Flare, he was tall, even for a Valkyrian, with silver scales that gleamed under the bright lights and cold. "They were designed specifically for controlling Shadowmaw Shaman," the ambassador said. Without any greeting, his voice sharp and commanding, "I trust my property has not been damaged during my absence. These creatures require constant discipline and firm control to maintain proper submission." Jinwoo felt Krath tense beside him, and the Shadowmaw moved slightly forward, placing himself between the ambassador and his human parent. The protective gesture was unmistakable, and several of the human officers exchanged meaningful glances. "Actually, Ambassador, Commander," Jin said diplomatically, "we have had remarkable success with alternative care methods. Perhaps you would like to observe our results before making any decisions." Veltar's laugh was harsh and dismissive. "Observe? What could humans possibly know about handling Shadowmaws? We have been training these creatures for centuries using methods that have proven effective. Humans, step away from my property immediately." The command was delivered in the same sharp, aggressive tone that Valkyrian handlers always used, and it was accompanied by the activation of some kind of electronic device that made a high-pitched, whining sound. Jinwoo recognized it as the type of shock controller that the Valkyrians used to punish their Shadowmaws, but instead of cowering in fear as the ambassador expected, he moved directly in front of Jinwoo, spreading his powerful arms wide and lowering his head in an unmistakably protective stance. The growl that came from his throat was not the sound of a frightened animal, but the warning of a parent defending their child. "Impossible," Veltar hissed as he stared at his Shadowmaw in disbelief. "No Shadowmaw has ever protected a human over a Valkyrian. This cannot be happening." Jinwoo stepped forward. His heart was pounding, but his voice was steady. "And come, Ambassador, please," Jinwoo said as he gently placed his hand on Krath's shoulder to keep the Shadowmaw from charging. "There has been no damage to Krath. In fact, I think you will find that he is healthier and more stable than he has ever been." The touch of Jinwoo's hand seemed to calm Krath slightly, but the Shadowmaw remained in his protective position, watching the Valkyrians with suspicion and ready to fight if necessary. "You dare lecture me about the handling of my own creature?" Veltar snarled, his scales darkening with anger. "Guards, remove this human immediately and restore proper discipline to this beast." The moment the guards moved toward Jinwoo, Krath exploded into action. Instead of the mindless violence that everyone expected, the Shadowmaw demonstrated remarkable control and intelligence. He disarmed the first guard with surgical precision, using his claws to knock the weapon away without seriously injuring the soldier. He used his massive body to block the second guard while being careful not to harm him permanently. Then Krath positioned himself directly in front of Jinwoo and released a roar that was so loud and powerful it made the reinforced walls of the cargo bay vibrate. The message was clear and unmistakable. Anyone who wanted to hurt his human parent would have to go through him first. "Stand down, Commander," Jin ordered, but her command was directed at the Valkyrian guards, not at "Ambassador, I think we need to discuss this situation more carefully." Zarso Young stepped forward with her tablet full of data and readings. "The past 3 days, our research suggests that your people's understanding of these creatures may need some updating." Veltar was staring at Krath with something approaching shock on his reptilian features. "Display this kind of protective behavior toward anyone, let alone a human. The creature should have been cowering on the ground, begging for mercy instead." "Small human, this is not possible," the ambassador said quietly, his anger replaced by confusion. "Shadowmaws do not form emotional attachments. They are predators, weapons trained from birth to serve. they do not love, but even as he spoke the words, Vel, Tar could see the evidence right in front of him. Krath was gently nuzzling Jinwoo's shoulder while keeping his eyes fixed on the potential threats in the room. The massive creature was making that soft, musical sound that the ambassador had never heard from any Shadow Maw before. Jinwoo looked directly at the ambassador and spoke with quiet conviction. He is a thinking, feeling being who responds to kindness and respect if you want him. To cooperate, you need to understand that he has chosen me as his family. The word family seemed to hit Veltar like a physical blow. Shadow Maws were not supposed to have families. They were supposed to be solitary creatures, bound only by fear and training. But looking at Krath and Jinwoo together, it was impossible to deny what he was seeing. Commander, agreements will benefit both our peoples. Veltar nodded slowly, still staring at the impossible scene before him. Yes, the treaties will bring prosperity to the Valkyrian Empire, and to human space as well. Then, perhaps, Jinwoo said carefully, this could be the beginning of a new kind of cooperation between our species. What if Krath could serve as a bridge, helping both humans and Valkyrians understand each other better? The cargo bay fell silent, except for Krath's gentle purring as he leaned against Jinwoo. The sound seemed to fill the space with warmth and possibility. For the first time since entering the room, Ambassador Veltar looked uncertain. The conference room aboard the starship Harmony Edge had never seen such an unusual gathering. Ambassador Veltar sat at one end of the polished table with his guards standing behind him. Her senior officers occupied the middle positions representing human interests in this delicate negotiation. At the far end of the table, a week ago, the massive Shadow Maw was calm and alert, his golden eyes tracking every movement in the room but showing none of the fear or aggression that had defined his behavior for the past 2 years. This is unprecedented, Ambassador, Veltar said. As he studied the pair, his voice had lost much of its earlier anger, replaced by something closer to scientific curiosity. I have owned Shadow Maws for most of my adult life, and I have never seen one behave in this manner. Dr. So Young cleared her throat and consulted her data tablet with respect. Ambassador, our observations over the past 3 days suggest that what you call ownership might be part of the problem. All point to systematic conditioning based on fear and pain. Commander Hai-Jin leaned forward, adding her support to the xenobiologist's findings. Then previously believed when treated with respect and kindness, they demonstrate problem-solving abilities, social bonding, and even what appears to be genuine affection. As if responding to the mention of affection, Krath made that soft musical trilling sound and gently bumped his massive head against Jinwoo's shoulder. The gesture was so clearly loving that even the Valkyrian guards exchanged surprised glances. Veltar watched this interaction with growing amazement. On Velcro's prime, his Shadow Maw had always been kept in isolation cells and brought out only for ceremonies or shows of power. He had never seen one display contentment, let alone happiness. But how do you explain the aggression? The ambassador asked the 3 handlers that this creature killed were experienced professionals trained in our methods for decades. Jinwoo spoke up quietly, his hand resting on Krath's scaled shoulder. In cages hurt with electric shocks, and taught that all humanoid creatures were enemies when someone finally showed him kindness. For Veltar to hear the Valkyrian methods of Shadow Maw training had been passed down through generations, and questioning them meant questioning centuries of tradition. But the evidence was sitting right in front of him in the form of a creature that should have been his most prized possession, but had never shown him even a fraction of the loyalty it now displayed toward a human. Dar. So Young continued her presentation. Ambassador, we believe that what you are seeing here represents the true nature of Shadow Maws. When they are not traumatized, they are highly social creatures, capable of forming deep emotional bonds. They have complex communication systems, and they appear to have what we can only describe as empathy to demonstrate her point. So Young gestured toward Jinwoo, who was looking tired after the long morning. Immediately, Krath noticed his human parent's fatigue and adjusted his position to provide a more comfortable resting place. He even began that deep purring sound that seemed designed to calm and comfort. Remarkable, Veltar whispered. He has never done anything like that for me. In 2 years of ownership, he has shown me nothing but fear and barely controlled aggression. Commander Hai-Jin saw an opening and pressed forward gently. Ambassador, you mentioned that the peace negotiations were successful. and that trade between our peoples will increase dramatically. What if this situation could become part of that? Though his tone suggested he was genuinely curious rather than dismissive, Jinwoo took a deep breath and made his proposal. What if Krath became the first Valkyrian human cultural exchange ambassador? He could help both our species learn better ways to understand and care for these magnificent creatures. Imagine if your people could form the same kind of bonds with their shadow maws. But you see, Hirtharum fell silent as everyone considered the implications of such an arrangement. Veltar studied Krath's calm, contented posture and compared it to the fearful, aggressive creature he had brought aboard. Just 3 days ago, the difference was so dramatic it was hard to believe they were the same being you would be willing to share. Your methods, the ambassador asked, with something approaching respect in his voice more than willing. Jinwoo replied, if it means that anyone who wants to learn DR so young, added her scientific perspective, the applications could be revolutionary, ambassador. Better animal care techniques could improve agriculture, companionship programs, even security operations. When creatures trust their handlers instead of fearing them, they perform better in every measurable way. Tar looked around the room, taking in the faces of humans. Creatures were more capable than Valkyrian prejudice had suggested, and now this situation with his Shadowmaw was forcing him to reconsider even more assumptions. There would be conditions. Making a momentous decision, regular reports on the creature's well-being, cultural exchange programs between our species, and he paused, looking directly at Jinwoo. Krath shifted beside him and realized that the Shadomo somehow understood that important decisions were being made. The great creature looked up at his human parent with those trusting golden eyes, and Jinwoo knew that he could not let this opportunity pass. Accept those conditions, Ambassador, Jinwoo said with a smile, but I have one condition of my own. Veltar raised an eyebrow ridge. What condition? Krath comes with me, Jinwoo said as he gently scratched behind the Shadowmaw's ears. We are family now, and families stick together. For the first time since entering the room, Ambassador Veltar smiled. It was a small expression on his reptilian features, but it was genuine. Very well, human, I agree to your terms. As the meeting concluded and arrangements were made for Jinwoo's new role as an interspecies animal behavior consultant, word of their story began to spread beyond the Harmony Edge. The galaxy soon requests were coming in from other species, asking for human handlers to work with their own dangerous or difficult creatures. Needed assistance with their temperamental crop guardians. Even the mysterious vegan traders inquired about human expertise with their exotic petsit. But, as the species who understood that every creature, no matter how alien or dangerous, just wanted to feel loved and accepted. Later, when Jinwoo and Krath walked through the jungle cities of Velcro's Prime together, they would often stop to watch young Shadowmaws playing with their Valkyrian handlers. The old methods of fear and punishment were being replaced with patience. Simple truth that Jinwoo's grandmother had taught him so many years ago. Every living being, great or small, just wanted to feel safe and loved. And watching the stars wheel overhead, he would remember that sometimes the most important discoveries happened not in laboratories or battlefields, but in the simple act of one being choosing to trust. And a Thurkrath would curl up beside his human parent, his massive form radiating contentment and warmth, and together they would dream of all the other creatures throughout the galaxy. Was a friendlier place when approached with an open heart, and Jinwoo and Krath had proven that friendship could bloom in the most unexpected places between the most unlikely. Hope that understanding could bridge any gap, that love could overcome any fear, and that sometimes the scariest monsters just needed someone to show them that they were worthy of being loved. The end, that was the most human thing of all.